Record. All right, welcome everyone to the special webinar tonight. I am so excited to be here with these fantastic men. Thank you again for joining me. I keep on thanking them. And thank you for those who are watching live or are going to be watching the recording. You are about to have an epic experience, and I know it because when you bring epic people together, like most of the time you don't know what's going to happen, and that's the best part. And so I want to take a moment. I tend to just take a couple moments to pause and get grounded, because I think it's important wherever you're coming from, you guys as well, to just get connected to that physically. And since we're talking about men's health, I think grounding is a really nice place to start. So I'm going to invite you all, whether you're listening or in the session right now, to just take a moment with your body to relax against whatever you're sitting on, or if you're standing. And if your feet are touching the ground, let them root down into the earth. And just take a moment to let whatever's happened today just melt away. Or if it's not melting away, let it integrate if there's something that needs to integrate. And you're letting your breath guide that. Breathing in whatever it is that you need. And letting go of whatever can be released or pushed to the side for now. Maybe bring in a little bit of a deeper breath, trying to fill in your lungs, but all those areas in your body that might not have been breathed into recently. Which areas need some space? Can you let go through your exhale? And taking one more deep breath like that. And with our theme tonight being men, you take a moment to connect to an influential man in your life. Maybe sending out some positivity or gratitude towards this person for what they've done for you, whether they know it or not. None of us are here without the impact of a man in our life. Several, in fact. My intention tonight is connection, education, and flow. And with that, let's take one more breath. And slowly coming out of it. All right. Can be as simple as a few deep breaths to reset. So I want to introduce who these men are, not by what they do, but who they are to me and why I invited them here today. So I initially got the idea of opening up this conversation about men's health several years ago. And at the time, Travis and I were just becoming friends, and we met over Instagram, both being coaches. And I had reached out to him, and I don't know what it was, but something had sparked, and we hopped on a Skype call and just started brainstorming about what the world of coaching looked like from a man's perspective, and me seeing it as a woman. And so that seed was planted several years ago. Mm. And Trav, to me, not only are you a rock star, but you are just such a force of energy and positivity in the world. And to have seen you really expand into that in the last couple of years, and to have been part of that in some way, it's just such an honor to have been developing this friendship with you. And as your beautiful poster in the back, Adventure Awaits, I definitely associate that with you, and how you sparked that in me and those around you. It was a clear, of course I was going to invite you to this conversation because you've been a big part of this evolution and bring this to the world. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And the feeling is definitely mutual. You bring an incredible energy also, and that definitely radiated with me. And you've been a big part of my own journey as well. So I think you know that well.
Yeah, well, I think that's that mutual thing, right? When you just surround yourself with great people, you just lift each other up, and that's the goal here. So
absolutely.
And Rob, I'm going to pass on over to you. I met Rob, oh my gosh, it's been 5 or 6 years, I think, when I was an ambassador for Lululemon, and you were running the program at the time, right? And I remember the first time I met you in person, I was working at Lululemon in Westmount at the time, and my ambassador poster, which was way too big for comfort, was there. And you're like, I know that girl. And I remember hearing your voice, and it was just so nice to connect. But I think, you know, for you, you had such an impact on me when you were doing some I Goal You coaching, and I was in one of your 4-week programs. And I remember there was like this big spark that connected with my personal like romantic relationships and my relationship with money. And I remember that like you lit something up in me that way. And more than that, you lit up this desire to celebrate life. And I still go back to that because I tend to get a little too serious about this random stuff I do. And so I want to thank you for that, because that impact has lasted several years and has been built upon. So I was just so stoked. It's been years that I've been wanting to do something with you. And this is, I feel, just the start of that. And I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And I'm just like very proud of what you've become. It's like, it's like,
thanks.
I get to be a guest on your show.
Well, who knows? Maybe this will become a show. Who knows what happens, right? I feel there's so many men I want to talk to about this, and you know, the impact of how women can lift you guys up. So thank you. Vince, I mean, we go a few years back now as well, and we've had several good dance parties. And I think some really memorable nights have been with you and around the city. And I just really appreciate how the relationship has evolved and what you're up to as well with Movember. And, you know, you're just all around great dude. So I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. That's very kind. Very happy to be on the call and be sharing this, sharing the good word that is Movember, and that is also Men's Health.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a few messages here that I want to, you know, share with everyone in regards to the Movember messaging and all. So I'm not sure if right now is the right time if you want to continue with the introductions, but you know, whenever it's, you know, you let me know when it's the right time to pipe in and give you the rundown about
absolutely
this special month that has been now happening for 10 years in Canada.
Yeah, I think Movember, it's like such a classic now, you know. I mean, if I could grow a mustache, and who knows, maybe when I'm like in my 60s, I totally will or something. Hopefully no one lets me do that, but I totally would be growing.
We'll be there to say no.
You'll be there to say no. Pat, you and I, we also go a few years back, but I feel it's probably in the last year that we've really connected and spent some more time together. And, you know, I think you had mentioned how our conversations always leave you feeling inspired. And I feel the same way. Like you are one, like this, the level of energy you have. I mean, you and Trav probably are a similar style of energy. And I really appreciate that. And just like, yeah, like you really light up a room, like one, cause you always have that smile on your face. And, the last couple of weeks, I've really appreciated like the time we spent in Ottawa, you know, leading these communities and in Quebec City, and just seeing your leadership. And I think that's something you sparked in me is like, you know, as a coach, like we often talk about, you know, working with people we feel hell yes about. And when I feel that about like being a stand for someone going after what they want, you definitely stand out for that. That I've been like, Pat, you got to do it. And like, you've always been receptive to that. And I love seeing what you're up to. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And Andrew, oh my gosh, I just have so much love when I think about Andrew Bathory. Just, oh, you're so talented, and you really, like, I do feel like, yeah, it's just so much love that you give, and to see what you've created in your community with Elements and how that's evolved over the years, and to have been part of that this past weekend was really meaningful. But I think to see how we connected and kept that connection over the years, and just to see where that goes. And I cannot wait for you to bring your perspective into this tonight. And you've been leading men's retreats too, which I think will be really interesting to see your work. And so thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So obviously I said, I told everyone I was, you know, 5 awesome and like it's so clear. And with that, I'd love to turn it to you, Vince, to kind of open up this conversation around Movember, because that also kind of sparked the idea of this conversation, because in November I lead a cleanse, and part of the proceeds go to Movember, and you lead that campaign here in Montreal. So I thought it'd be great for you to talk a little bit about Movember so people know what it's about, what it stands for. So take it away.
All right. So thank you very much. Well, Movember, as you know, is most of you know, maybe not, has been around now for just about 15 years, and it was founded in Australia, out of Melbourne, Australia. It really started out of like the funniest ways, which was essentially just four guys having beers one day and talking about how funny it would be to get the mustache to come back. So they gave themselves a challenge to grow a mustache for a month, and at the end of it, they have a bit of a get together, and that was it. And they had so much fun that the following year, they went from 4 people to 30, and they said, we want to raise some funds and raise some awareness because we just had such a blast. And they approached the Prostate Cancer Association of Australia, and they said, we think we can fundraise up to $50,000. So the association said, well, we don't really get it, like the whole mustache thing, like what's that all about? So they said no, we don't think we want to like partner up with you guys. I said, okay, well, we'll do it anyways. They said, well, but if you do raise money, we'll gladly take it. So the guys, the Garoni brothers and friends, they said, all right. They did it anyway, and then they raised over $50,000. And they gave it back and to the Prostate Cancer Association like they said they would, and that alone was their single biggest donation that they'd ever received. Now, fast forward, 2017, Movember has raised over $800 million globally, and it is the single greatest movement for men's health in history. It's insane. It really, and one of the reasons why I think that it went so viral for so many years is because anything that goes viral, that whole word being viral, it's really because it's something that is disruptive. When you put something out there that is disruptive, it gets people's attention, and that's what the mustache was doing, because people hadn't. It was hugely popular in the 70s and 80s, and then it was just gone. And in a funny format, people just said, yeah, I'm going to grow that. I think it's hilarious. Yeah, I'm willing. Well, attaching that to a great, cause and a great messaging is how we are here now. In Canada, it's been 10 years. And what Movember has essentially, Movember really got inspired from the women's movement for breast cancer, the breast cancer movement and awareness. So that's really how and it was fairly similar numbers in terms of how many men get affected by prostate cancer and how many women get affected by breast cancer. So that's one of the reasons why Movember was they chose that initial cause. Fast forward more years. Movember added testicular cancer, because testicular cancer is the most common form of cancer for men ages between 15 and 29 years old. Prostate cancer, of course, affects men mostly starting in their mid-40s, generally. They added another cause then, which was mental health. Huge cause that affects 1 in 5 men every year in Canada. So, and again, you can be a CrossFit champ, you can be in perfect physical health. You don't know if you're not mentally healthy or not. The only thing you can do is talk about it. And the mustache is kind of like that convector to, engage in a discussion and a conversation about it. So, and then fast forward to, again, in the past few years, Movember added suicide prevention because 3 out of 4 suicides in Canada are men. So there's really a crisis here, when it comes to those numbers. And conversations is the gateway to change in that dynamic. And the funds are the gateway to help in pushing research to a whole other level. So, yes, there's a massive awareness campaign, but we funded, I've got the numbers here, over 1,200 projects in over 21 countries. In Quebec alone, we're talking about $17 million that's been given back to 84 research projects. Again, though, I got to also mention that is that, all these issues are not, prostate cancer is not a provincial issue. It's a global issue, of course. So talking about provincial is politically, it's always a thing that, make clear. It's like, hey, it's not a provincial issue, it's global. But it's nice to see that there is some quality research in Quebec, of course. So, you know, where Movember is at now, aside from growing funny mustaches and having funny conversations and having women that participate in Movember by, you know, supporting the men in their lives and, you know, sometimes I've seen Mel take like her hair and put it on her upper lip as like, hey, I'm a Mo sister. It's just, the mustache is what we use to have these conversations. But one of the things now Movember has done is really put forward this, the MOVE initiative, which is engaging men to be active and talk to their doctors during Movember. You know, everyone should have a conversation with their doctor once a year. Well, you know, right now is a good time to have that instinct like, hey, I should call my doc. I haven't seen him in a while. And have that open conversation. And if people aren't active, well, you know, like getting out and being part of a run club or setting yourself a goal of saying, I want to, you know, run 50 or 100 kilometers this month. This is what we're trying to push men to do. This is what Movember is trying to do. Of course, Movember is hugely popular in campuses and universities. It's a men's foundation, so it's very popular with 911 services. I mean, it's police, paramedics, firefighters, military, and so on. You know, very popular in the community with like hockey clubs and whatnot. But in the workplace, of course, hugely popular. So essentially, that's what Movember is all about. And it starts with these healthy conversations. You have to be humble. You have to live it through those values of realizing that, hey, it's not just about being physically healthy, but mentally healthy. And you have to be, if it's not those mental health numbers, 1 out of 5, I mean, if it's not one of us here, it's a friend, it's a sibling, it's a family member, it's someone in the workplace. Someone gets affected by it. So they're just alarming stats. And I think it's more the power to all of us to say like, hey, like it's an important month and let's just keep plugging away. So in a nutshell, that is that whole Movember 101 and why it's so important to not only, I think, participate, but be aware and to share the good word.
Well, I didn't know a lot of those stats, so thanks for like highlighting some of those things. Of course, you know, numbers talk and those facts. I think it was what hit me a lot is that suicide rate is like, it's heartbreaking. So, and the impact they've had. And so I'd love to hear a little bit, you know, on your end, like this whole conversation of men's health, whether it's related to Movember, just like in what you see or your personal experience, what do you feel is working? What's missing? What's happening from your perspective?
That's a great question. I mean, I think men's health and the movement towards men's health is amazing. And to finally have a platform like Movember and things that have grown out of that movement as community coming together to support it outside of specific sports arenas or things like that is also very much needed. There's so many gradients of men in the world and different needs and different communities that need support. And I'm so happy to hear from Vincent about the mental health thing this year being sort of a focus for Movember, if it's my understanding. Most of the communities I work in, the main thing, aside from, you know, needing encouragement or support along the way of getting physical and more active, it's talking about what's happening beneath the surface. I think any man that lives in this world and identifies and presents themselves outwardly as a man struggles with things that they can't let, or they feel they can't let to the surface. So for me, the most interesting thing, I mean, a lot of men have experience doing sports and getting physical and, you know, playing on teams, and that's one level. But for me, it's more about speaking and learning how to communicate and learning how to listen, more importantly, perhaps, and finding that balance of becoming receptive and letting our guards down and really hearing and seeing each other and the rest of our community around us from a place of intention to heal or intention to move beyond just the physical level.
Hmm.
And there's,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, Mel. There's almost this side that I love what you just said, Andrew. And there's something about even that inner. There's even something around that inner conversation that men are having with themselves. Like, what are they like? What's that voice that they're giving themselves through that physical practice that causes them maybe to shut down, that causes them to have a breakdown in the communication? So, like, what are they? How are they judging themselves? How are they pushing themselves? Maybe not for the best of reasons, the healthiest of reasons. That has such a big trickle effect.
Have you do you have any? I feel your background, as an athlete, playing football and having been in that that athletic domain. Did you have an experience of that?
It's pushing through. It could be pushing through injuries and being like, I got to make this happen no matter what, or no longer being an athlete and then solely identifying myself as a football player. And what happens the next morning when you're no longer a football player, or you're no longer a basketball player or a soccer player, and then you're doing the practice. Why are you doing your practice? There's this physical aspect, and then why are you pushing so hard on the grind? Is it just for a physical appearance? And if you're not meeting that expectation, then what's that inner voice telling yourself? Are you aware of it at least? Versus a sense of well-being, which is maybe not the first thing that we think about when we're at the gym doing CrossFit or yoga or whatever it could be.
And I feel like from what I know of you, Pat, your journey, working for Lululemon in a female dominated environment. And the other day while we were waiting in the car and Pat just I'm going to refer to it because he was just you do this workout and it just wakens up that chakra. And I was like, did you ever think you would be talking about chakras so casually in your lifetime?
From the locker room to chakras.
Yeah. Well, was there something for you because I really, I consider you a really great listener and communicator. Is there something that supported you in that to recreate your identity from athlete to man and human being?
There's definitely a connection towards the importance of the community. So there's definitely something about the people around me that support me that I could support as well. So there's definitely finding my place within a community. So I think within my team, what created that effect was we're 70 football players, and which is a great community on its own. And then you fall into the real world and you don't really identify yourself anymore. So I think there's something about identifying yourself as a part of a community and then realizing the importance of supporting it and being supported by it. I think that transition definitely helped out. And I think there's this side of just working on that listening skill of realizing just being there for other people and realizing the impact that you could have just by listening and not necessarily always have to fix problems. So yeah, that's it.
I think that's the best way to fix problems is by simply listening, man. That's all you got to do. Just lend an ear. And in my experience, that's kind of been, anybody wants to solve a problem, they usually have it already within themselves. They just need to kind of express that out to somebody.
That's it's an interesting conversation about what a man needs in order to access that side. And I've been in this conversation for a while now, and my role with Lululemon now is specifically within the men's business. So we're constantly exploring this, and it is to your point, Trav, is that it doesn't have to be something that's so elaborate or so contrived or that's so strategic. It literally is creating space for guys to be heard. I've been doing stuff in terms of just doing this simple listening exercise where a guy listens to another guy for 3 minutes. The listener is not allowed to say anything, not allowed to judge, not allowed to provide any kind of hand gestures or anything like that. They're just simply there to listen. And for a lot of guys, it's very, very uncomfortable. First off, for the guy who's speaking, and then secondly, for the guy who's listening. And that, to me, what that just says is that, man, we got so much work to do just from the listening perspective.
We're not used to active listening.
Wow.
We're as men, right? We go out and hang out at the bar or after the yoga practice and we talk, or really as women, frankly, and we're waiting for our turn to speak, right? But when we do that, we're not really listening, actively listening to somebody, right? And so I call this the brick wall practice, right? Oh, wait. I asked somebody, well, what do you want to do? What's your heart asking you to do? And they say, I don't know. Of course they don't know. They're asking you for advice, right? And you go, all right, brick wall. And you just create that just awkward space and just hold them at that level, right? And guess what? They know. We all know, right? So it is being good at listening and holding that space, creating that space for people to be able to express themselves and kind of talk it out for themselves, I think. You're right.
I love with Rob how you brought it, and I think it goes with anything. It's once they get that feeling of what it could, like what it feels like in that moment, that awkwardness, yet the exchange after is worth $1 million, then he'll want to repeat it. Then we're going to want to repeat it, right? The first time you listen, you realize that aha moment to the other person, you brick wall them, and then they get this aha, and you're like, boom, I got it. I felt it. I like that feeling.
And you know what they do, Patrick, is they go, you give the best advice ever. And you're like, yeah, I didn't even say anything. But if you want to give good advice, just don't give any advice. Just listen. Boom. What else? What else is going on? Talk to me.
Yeah. I learned that from a friend of mine who's like a border crossing guard who literally does this to me all the time. He's a bit of a jerk because he does the whole silent thing until I get uncomfortable and I basically say what is on my mind. And he's the best interviewer / intimidator / but it's all it is the silence, but it takes a lot of comfort to be in that silence, right? It takes a lot of confidence to know that somebody is going to find their way out. And typically as guys, we want to solve. We want to be able to pull it out of people and say that we did it. Whereas it's so much easier for them to do it themselves.
Yeah, there's a whole difference between being outcome oriented. So it's so yang to be like, that is the exercise, that's the weight, that's the goal, I'm going to hit that. And once you hit that, then something's supposed to happen, versus just being in process. And there's so many practices that involve listening. And I do a lot of work with voice work and sound work. And everyone always gets a little bit uncomfortable, man or woman, when you tell them there's no end goal here except to have an experience. You're just here to feel what you're feeling. Anything could happen. We don't know yet. Just let yourself experience that without a need to have a finished goal or product or outcome in mind, which is a whole different way of thinking of health as well. Obviously health is the goal, but to get there, there's so many different pathways and perspectives and parts of ourselves that need time to reveal.
And what do you guys feel you need? Because Rob, I found it interesting. You're saying having guys access that space, to go there for that listening and for that opening to happen. Do you guys have, a preference or and I'm curious maybe from a woman's perspective or just in general, how do you access it for yourself, or what do you need to access it for yourself from others? What does that look like?
I would say for me, there's 3 things, and it's very simple. It started off as meditation, straight up, every day meditating. The more and more I meditate, we talked about this on when you were on my podcast, I think. The more and more I meditate, the more and more I am me, or I'm able to kind of break down those barriers and kind of just be me, right? Meditation, journaling, and then having really my own coach, who really is a great brick wall in my life. So those 3 things for me have been, it's stacking the weights: meditation, then journaling, then the coach. Those 3 things, the trifecta, has just been utterly life-changing. Utterly life.
Cool.
I have a coach as well, which is fantastic. But there's 2 other things that I do. I give myself grace in terms of I know that I'm my mother's son. I'm sensitive. I'm probably one of the most sensitive guys, and I'm typically the guy that most of my guy friends come to talk to about their stuff that they don't want to talk to with other people. But what I do when I need my outlet is that I ask permission. So I'll talk to friends and I'll say listen, is it cool if we chat? Cause I gotta unload some stuff, and you don't have to say anything. I just need to get it off my chest.
I like that. Vince, how about you? What, in terms of this, listening piece, or what you've seen or what you've experienced?
My goodness. I mean, when it comes to, active listening, really, meditation's been huge. It's not something, unfortunately, that I haven't had a chance to actually sustain, but it's, for the time that I've done it, it's been amazing. There's been, like, I felt some significant changes for the time that I was doing it, and I'm definitely a fond believer of it. What being right now in the Movember zone so much, where I can really relate to, when it comes to listening, active listening, is when I'm speaking to some of our Mo Bros and Mo Sisters or people in our community that have some amazing testimonials about what they've gone through for any of the causes that we're supporting. I just spoke today with a cardiologist in the Montreal area who, has been affected twice by prostate cancer, and he's still going through treatments as we speak. And, being able to be in a position to really understand what they're going through, I mean, it hits home. Mm-hmm. If you're putting yourself in a place where you have to be humble, you really start to realize that, like, these people feel that, like, their lives are in danger and life is precious. And this is where you kind of realize, wow, this is really much more than just, right now in this case, mustaches or just having a good time. Listening is everything. And I think most of the time we're guilty of not fully paying attention to what people are saying. And one of the best gifts you can give to somebody else is your attention. And, one of the most important questions that we ask every day, and we hardly, put too much, we don't put enough focus on. It's a very simple one, and we ask it many times a day. And it's, how are you? How are you doing? And it's so instinctive to be like, oh yeah, great, I'm doing fine. But I challenge anyone to ask it a second time. First time, people forget. Ask it a second time. No, like, how are you doing? Take it and look at them in the eye and be like, no, how are you? And then you don't have to expect a big answer. Just their body language will tell you. And then you can get some different views from that one. So, that's how I relate to that, to, listening, into active listening, and the concept of, today's topic, certainly.
I love asking, how are you? And seriously, what's the go-to answer? It's right. It's fine. It's good. Yeah. It is what it is, whatever. Right. And so when people say that, I'm like, seriously, like, what's stopping you from being amazing right now? And then you kind of really get into it. What's not good today? I think that's a really cool conversation started, and really able to really actively listen after a good question like that.
It's a challenge that could be included in so many of the health clubs. Ask it a second time. Ask how are you twice, just to be sure. And then just gauge people's reaction from it. And then you can go out and have a sweat. And then you can have a conversation after it. That goes a long way. And that's what I'm reminded from November to, pay extra attention to. And this is that specific question.
I love that. And I think there's a part of it that's like, I also don't let people off the hook when I have a feeling that something isn't right. So if something is, especially with the guys, like if there's something that's just like not cool or not kosher, I'm not the type of person to let it go. I don't think that everybody's like that, but I just don't. And now I think that I've conditioned the people around me to know that I will dig, and I will go deep into your soul and pull out whatever it is you're trying to hide from me. So I'm not trying to hide it.
Yeah, you're such a stand for people that way. Do you find people, like, because you said men will come to you, like your friends you're kind of their go-to. But do you find, like, I know I have a tendency to hide when I'm like going through my shit. And so people have to literally come pull me out you teach what you need, because I'm like, obviously, but do you find that they're like, people retract knowing this about you sometimes?
They might, but I think at the end of the day that they're craving someone to ask them the right question or to talk to. So, I'm not a jerk about it. I just know that, like, there are times where people need a little bit more. They just need a little bit of a pull or a push.
And Andrew, I'm curious, like, because one of the things that's coming up for me with this whole listening piece, there's like the assumption that there's something that we're not comfortable talking about if we're saying automatically like, hey, this is fine, but actually there's something else going on, which kind of triggers this like shame piece or like being vulnerable. What kind of stigma is attached to some of the issues that might be blocking men from feeling amazing or, thriving or whatnot? What comes up for you around that, or like that you might see, or that, what is it that's holding us back?
I think the biggest thing is fear of being vulnerable, fear of, letting that guard down. For a lot of guys, we've been so conditioned over and over again to just like put on our game face, to hold ourselves together, to be strong, to be either the strong and silent type or like the aggressive and really loud type. But there's not a lot of variation presented to us growing up, speaking of my generation, and it's starting to shift now, thankfully. But I think what it really is that sort of like what Rob was saying, like giving permission, like giving yourself permission to just ask for someone to talk to, giving yourself permission to stop and take a breath and then respond to the question honestly and be like, you know what, actually I'm not that great today. And it also catches other people off guard. And then, so there's sort of that clunkiness when honesty starts to happen, unless you already know the person very well and you can feel people are uncomfortable. I know that I have a practice of when I'm not feeling great, I don't pretend I'm feeling great. Even, at the front desk of my studio, if someone says, how's it going? I'm very honest. And sometimes people don't want to hear that, and you can tell right away. But in a way, that's also sort of asking for permission, by saying the truth, and you can sense how someone responds, and that's not the right time. Or it could be the perfect time. And yeah, I think there's a lot of layers of shame and fear are the main things, in the research that I've been doing and in the experiences I've had. It doesn't matter if, the body type or the past experiences someone has had, there's always a layer or two of that we all have, from something that has happened in our lives. And the more we can recognize that and understand that that's a shared experience, it's not just us. We're all going to have various degrees of that. I think it's so important. So permission, when Rob said that like hit so hard home. That's the thing, like cultivating that safe space and giving permission for that to happen. And another part is like stopping, like slowing down. It doesn't have to be in movement all the time. There's like, when you really stop and you see someone, there's a stillness. There's a grounding, as you mentioned at the start of this piece, that has to happen. And when that happens, powerful things can come through. Yeah. I
think it's really powerful that like giving yourself permission, and I think that's like, hey, you have the right to like express that. And, I was actually just talking to someone yesterday because Lewis Howes, I don't know if you guys have heard of him. I think it's out or it's coming out soon. He's written a book called The Mask of Masculinity, where he's kind of broken down, and like, I cannot wait to read it. But I was just actually listening to a podcast episode today, kind of talking about it, this idea of like feelings, we just popped up with shame and vulnerability, which, I would consider like, most men aren't talked to, like vulnerability. When does that come into play in terms of like knowing that even exists? And I think a lot of us operate with like a handful of feelings that are deemed acceptable versus all the others that also have a role to play. And as you're mentioning, like how men, you're often told like, be the strong and silent type. So what happens to all those things you're not allowed to feel or whatnot? So I'm curious to see about this conversation around feelings, or maybe even more about vulnerability for the rest of you, if there's something that pops up there.
And I think it's probably what I know from you guys so far. And if you guys are connected with Mel, there's definitely something that we're in touch a little bit more with how we feel. And knowing you a little bit, Andrew, like you're like one of those specialists in that. But there is something there. I think there's something very easy to talk about feelings. We could talk about honesty. We could talk about vulnerability. And until someone has experienced it once again, it's just words. It's only cerebral, right? So there's something about getting that, like putting yourself in the space where you could feel that. What does that feel like? And you're asking us earlier, how do we like create a practice for ourselves? And right away, I think it needs to be a daily conversation. It's either through journaling with yourself or talking with a peer or talking with a coworker or a friend or a girlfriend or whatever it is. And I think it's just like keeping that conversation alive. So you're kind of staying in touch and making sure that you're gut checking yourself on a regular basis. So you're seeing your evolution yourself on how you're feeling. And then eventually, there's a word that comes with that feeling. And then you're often faced with a certain situation that comes up with another feeling. I don't know if it's generalizing, but I don't think I wasn't raised in a world of feelings, right? It was more like, toughen up, bud. And that's totally fine. And today I wouldn't change anything in the world. And I'm loving right now discovering how different feelings, the particular side of each feeling, and how could I react and how I show up differently. So there's definitely something around that is easier said than done. And there's something about experiencing it so you could put words on it a little bit more.
I love that, Pat. That's like, it's just like awareness. And it has nothing to do with being perfect. That has nothing to do with like getting it right. I still experience it when there's something that happens, like, I don't know, watching like Good Will Hunting and that scene where he's like, it's not your fault, Will, it's not your fault. And I start to tear up, and I'm like, oh man, I'm like tearing up. And I'm like, why am I like afraid of tearing up at this point? This is an emotional, you know what I mean? And just like being aware of stuff like that, I think is the first step. I always cry at that part, by the way. It's just like, no matter how many times I watch that movie.
Such a great movie.
It is a great. What's wrong with crying at that movie, right? It's like,
nothing.
Like you're less of a man. It's like, well, I'm sorry, I'm a human being. I'm crying at Good Will Hunting, right? You need to own that.
But it was so weird. I had to hold it. Like the first time I was watching it in the theater, I had to like hold it in, thinking like there was something wrong with it. Like,
yeah.
You know?
I have done that. Film is my favorite art, right? And so I'm very vulnerable to crying at a good film. And I had watched the film The Way. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie The Way. Have you seen it?
No.
Martin Sheen. Oh my God, Melissa, you gotta go see The Way. You gotta see The Way. It's on Netflix. It's streaming now. You gotta watch it tonight. You guys gotta get back to me. So I watched this movie. And I've seen it probably 4 times. I love this film, right? It's so inspiring. I'm not going to give anything away, but you need to see this movie. And so I'd seen it a couple times before my girlfriend moved out here from Australia. And so we're watching it, and I'm just like, I'm crying, you know? And I got the tears kind of, and then it just starts to come into that like open weeping kind of thing happening, you know, where you can't control it. It's really ugly. And she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm a human being. Like, this is an emotional scene, man. What is going on, man? So, hey, but that doesn't make me any less of a man, according to me. So, whatever.
Well, I think you're just nailing something there, too. That idea that you would be less of a man, which I think that's often like what a lot of guys are still brought up with. It's like, if you cry, women were just like, it's like we're known to cry at least once a month, you know, like I know I do, like, like I'm like, okay, it's coming, and that's fine. Well, not all the time, but I think men, there's like that, like you just said, like, oh, will I be less of a man? But I feel that's one thing of like redefining what does it mean to be a man, you know, and it means whatever it is for you. And I think that's one thing that I pick up on, that it's like, what does that actually mean? You know?
To me, it is who at your highest self. At your absolute highest self. Everything else, I don't even care about. Whatever society's dictated what a man is, or whatever culture has dictated manhood, or what your parents or surroundings or religion or anything like that, doesn't matter. It's what you define as your highest self. And to me, that's it. And that's gravy, man. You do that and you're a badass.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things to say about how gender is just a construct that has been imposed on all of us. Mm-hmm. I was even listening to a podcast, I don't know, 2 weeks ago about how children's clothing in the 30s and 40s, they were all the same color. And then they realized they could make more money if they made pink and blue clothes, and they started to change what people were dressed in. And from there, you know, everything else has changed. And for a lot of people, they, you know, we're hearing more and more about it in social media, in pop culture now, about gender fluidity and ambiguity. And I think that's really a sign that our collective consciousness is waking up to understand that we're all human. You know, we all experience the same feelings, the same basic feelings. We all get touched by similar things or different things. And at the end of the day, we're all humans. And so I often get triggered when I hear just men's health. I'm like, well, thank God we're being invited into the conversation, but it's health, you know, it's not, it's health for us all. And we need to honor that. And I do believe that there needs to be safe space for men to go into and be given permission without women around. I think there's huge value in that, for us to feel safe and for us to let our guards down and for us to heal. But I think we have so much to learn from women. And I'm the first one to say that. You know, my friends that hold women's circle, I'm like, why can't I be there? Like, there's so much for me to learn. But I also get that, and I get that. So I have to leave, but I'm so grateful to be here with you guys.
Thank you, Andrew.
I can't finish this conversation with you, but thank you all so much for your insight and inspiration.
You're awesome, Andrew.
Thank you. Can you share,
Andrew,
before you hop off, can you share like one health practice that makes a difference for you that maybe those listening can benefit from?
Yes. Yoga tune-up is a method of self-massage, and there's a ball called the Gorgeous ball that massages your gut. And for me, it's been a game-changing self-practice that I do every day for my mental health. The majority of the serotonin is produced in our gut, and I suffer from anxiety and depression, and serotonin really helps me with that. But it helps you find your breath and helps you find the ground and get clear on whatever barriers you're building inside emotionally. And for me, that's my go-to medicine. More info on that.
What is that called?
Thank you for sharing.
One more time. I'm going to write that down. What is that called?
It's called the Gorgeous ball, like gorgeous, but gorgeous.
Gorgeous ball.
If you're in California right now, you have access to some of the best yoga tune-up teachers in the world. Jill Miller, the creator, from there. So,
okay, cool.
Check
Jill
it
Miller.
out. Enjoy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you so much.
Peace.
I love what he said, and I actually really love the fact that you're leading this conversation, Melissa, because I do think that there is a really amazing opportunity to get into this conversation about being a man with women. So we were up in Toronto a couple months ago for a men's experience. It was supposed to be like a men's experience where we took a bunch of dudes and we went into the Muskoka lakes, whatever they're called over there. And we, there were literally about 25 guys and I think about like 7 women. And it was a really interesting dynamic. So at one point, one of the facilitators, Jan, told us to separate from the groups of the men and then the groups of the women. So it was obviously more guys and girls. And he asked us this question where he was like, okay, so both of you groups, you need to come up with 3 questions that you've always wanted to ask the opposite sex, but just never just got around to it or didn't have the courage to, right? And so the girls went off into a different yurt, and the guys stayed in the other yurt, and it completely digressed with the guys. Like it turned into this whole conversation around like, why do girls date assholes? Or like what's it like to have boobs? Or
Nice job, guys.
Super weird question. And just, we're like 15-year-old kids. And so we landed on a few that were just okay. And then the girls came in. And of course we'd said the girls can go first. And they asked one question and we spent the next 2 hours on this question. And the question was, what is the biggest challenge that you have being the opposite sex? And it sparked a conversation that I don't think that we would have gotten to if it was just all dudes. And it was amazing. It was heated. It was uncomfortable. It was groundbreaking, but there was this understanding afterwards because of the fact that we had taken a topic or a conversation that we probably wouldn't have gotten into if we were just at a party or whatever, you know what I mean? So I think that there's a space there that we can create in terms of digging into specific topics that we need to dig into.
And I'm curious to what your answers are to that question. Because from my perspective, a big spark for this conversation to happen right now is this rise of female empowerment that I'm a part of, and I've been coaching women for years, as I told you guys in the emails. And I remember seeing those t-shirts of the future is female and it really hitting me because I was like, what is the impact of young men when they see girls in their class wearing that t-shirt? And also, like, because some of these conversations we don't necessarily have, like, I was like, okay, am I going to lead this with a group of guys? I was like, yeah, I'm going to go there. And I was nervous about it, you know, because we don't necessarily, it's like we keep things separate, you know, in certain contexts. So I'm curious to see, like, what, let's say you guys are thinking about, like, what is challenging to be of the opposite sex?
Can I just give really quickly? I'll give what the biggest thing was from.
Yeah, please.
About, and then I'll give you a space. Literally, it's the boiling pot analogy where guys are crabs, and you dump a bunch of crabs into this boiling pot of water, and the initial reaction is for obviously the crabs to try to get out, so they climb on top of each other to get out, and once one is almost ready to come out, the rest of the crabs pull that crab back in for them to boil to death together. So the analogy is that there are guys out there, I can imagine it's you guys, that are like willing to take the steps, willing to be vulnerable, willing to say what's on their mind and explore this other side of them that could possibly be construed as not manly. And there are guys who just aren't ready for that and who find it threatening. And the only way for them to come to grips with that is to pull those guys down. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we identify.
Wow.
That is so spot on. I don't think I could have said it any better. There's two ways to exert power, and then you know, as men, you want to be masculine, right? It's you either pull people up, or what do? You pull them down, and that's it, man. And unfortunately, most people, you know, we got these crabs that want to get out of the bucket and go for it and be vulnerable and be open, and you got the rest of the group that just aren't comfortable with that and want to pull down. I think in this group, I think it's probably safe to say that most of us are probably surrounded by a lot of that as well, disparaging kind of things. And I think it's tough in the beginning to be open, to be vulnerable, to be honest, to express yourself in your authentic way in the beginning, you know, because you're going to get a lot of disparaging things. You're going to have detractors. But as time goes on, I think it certainly becomes much easier.
Hmm.
And there's almost this side of, I don't know, there's something comes to mind when we think of this, like also being ready of what the reaction is going to be on the other side. Like, as positive as it may seem, if they lend a hand, are we willing to say yes? Like, are we willing to actually be vulnerable to the fullest? Or are we just going to be, I don't need help, but like, I'm going to be vulnerable. Or I'm going to be vulnerable and be like, I actually do need help and I'm willing to say yes. So I think there's like that follow-up as well that we need to take into consideration when playing for that.
Yeah, I think we're at men or I mean, people in general, but I think men, we're seeing, I'd like to think we're seeing a progression in the concept of emotional intelligence, right? And I feel like, you know, for women to be able to, you know, just share your emotions, I feel I think it comes a bit more naturally than it does to men. You know, you can get two women to sit down for coffee and it's like, hey, here's a story, here are my emotions, and then boom, it just like comes out, right? Men, it's like there's always more like the aspect of having shoulder to shoulder conversations, you know, like you can have the right conversations if you're maybe doing, you know, an activity together, you know, or if you're building something together, you can have some of these conversations, but not necessarily face to face. But I think we're at a point now where we're I like to think that emotional intelligence is getting, you know, more, it's more conscious. It's more at the forefront of people's mindset. Just like, you know, your physical well-being can be first nature, you know, or like if you hurt yourself, you know that you hurt, like you hurt your calf, you feel it right away. Well, if your feelings are getting hurt, it's not about just like you're feeling something, but it's about realizing what you're going through, and then the final step is exchanging and talking about it. So I'd like to think that, you know, men have gone through you know, life experiences and there's enough, like the world is evolving that we can actually have these conversations. We're doing it right now, and you know, hopefully there's people listening out there that are like, you know what, like I should have, you know, I should feel comfortable and open enough to have some of these discussions if I want to, you know. So
Mm.
That's what I'd like to think, and that's where all these conversations are sparking, and that's what Movember is trying to do. And that's whenever someone opens up, and whenever there's movements that are disruptive out there, we're pushing men to be like, hey, listen a bit more, be more aware of what the emotions you're going through, and sometimes those emotions are easier to share after you've gone through a bit of a physical process. If you've gone for a workout, if you've gone to yoga or anything, and it's like, I feel tired, I feel pretty good. And then like easier to share something that you didn't think you were going to be able to do. So
I agree with that all the time. I don't know. I didn't know that was a thing, but I go work out, I go surf, I go on a hike, and I'm willing to just open myself, man. I didn't know that was an actual, it must be the neurotransmitters going off in my head. Just, I'm so open that way, man.
And there's something around the evolution of going out for beers with buddies on a Thursday night versus going on a run, and how that conversation is completely different after.
Yeah,
Like,
so different.
Win-win.
You're right. Yeah. You ever had there's conversations with the guys having beer, right? And you're talking about the game, right? Cool. And that's great, but it's surface level stuff, which is fine sometimes. But then you go for a campfire at the beach or in the woods or something like that, and you're out in nature, and it's completely different conversation. Completely different. Everybody's more open. Everybody's having deep conversations, right? It's incredible. It's incredible. You're right, though. Going on a run, something like that, it's a much different conversation you're having.
And what do you feel like when you talk about like this example, these kind of conversations? What are these conversations that men want to be having that we, like, let's say, can be more aware of? Like, what are the things that people actually want to talk about? Or not, maybe don't want to, but that when they do, that's when they open up. That's like, these are actually the real things. Do you maybe have an experience of that? What are those real conversations?
My favorite is, so what do you want? Or seriously, like, how do you feel? When I get emails from, like we talked about, I get emails from men all the time that aren't used to this. Mm-hmm. And so when I open up that conversation and say, simple, what's your dream? What do you want in life? Something that simple in an email. And I get this giant email back. It's like a chapter in a book, because they've never been able to release that. So in my experience, men want that. They want that campfire conversation, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want that sports bar conversation anymore. They want to talk about that. And, I definitely feel like we've been evolving in a sense that we're more open to kind of discussing that. But it's incredible. I mean, I have men that are 50, in their 60s, always have to play the role of the masculine guy, have to be the husband, have to be the man. And you just ask a simple question: what do you want? What are your fears? What scares you? Right? Simple things like that we can talk about, and it's very normal for all of us, but most men aren't used to that. Mm-hmm. And the response you get, like on a coaching call, for example, this week I just signed this new guy, and he's in his 40s, and I won't name names, but I asked him straight up, I go, let's imagine that a miracle happened today. And a year from now, you're calling me and you're telling me about all the amazing things that have happened in your life over the next year. What are you telling me about? He didn't stop talking for about 30 minutes. It was the greatest coaching call. I was the best brick wall ever, but he wanted to get that out. And I can imagine all that pent up stuff for 40 years.
Wow.
Like your dreams and your goals. And it was a very emotional experience. This guy's never talked about it. And he's very clearly was very uncomfortable crying in front of me for the first time. But it was, man, we built some leverage there, and it was beautiful. So
I think to balance that conversation, I read an article a couple days ago around, I can't remember exactly what it was. I'll try to find it from you, Melissa. But one thing that it talked about in terms of men's mental health was the idea of play. And I think when it comes to, as evidenced by my 4 WhatsApp chat groups with a bunch of that once again digresses into like nothing of nothing, but just like stupid guys saying stupid things to each other. It's a type of play. Like it's like mental play. And I think to your point earlier around like when you go for a run or when you're playing team sports, whatever, that's play. And like that's something that's it's an outlet that we used to have, at least when I was growing up. That I think is being diminished because of, for whatever reason, we're not playing enough. And I think that there's a part of it that we just need to play. And I think, yes, if guys are constantly playing, we'll never get anything done. So there's a balance between those two things. There was another men's experience where we went to North Carolina and we got a bunch of guys together. We put them in different houses and we kind of just left them there without telling them what the itinerary was. And then we came back and one of the houses, they had self-assembled and started playing tag in the yard. Just waiting for us. These are grown men. These weren't like kids. These are grown men.
We never grow up, man. If anybody tells you they're grown up and they didn't grow up, we never grow up, man. But I love that in play. You bring up one of my favorite words ever because I had a guy come out and he's a coach and he came out from New Zealand. He visited me for like a week, and he sees me. And he's like, "Oh, you're doing so well for yourself and this and this." And the first morning I wake up and I'm going surfing. I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna do this, and he's grinding away on his computer. Right? He goes, "That's great, right? Cool." The next day, I'm doing the same thing. And he goes, "What? You're doing so well. You're so successful. What's your secret?" Right? And I go, "I don't know, man. I have a good time." And that's it. So I think that there's a point there, man, Rob. I really do.
Play,
yeah, absolutely.
Life's too short for any less, man.
I think that's the thing that we actually take away first when we want to get serious, get shit done. Automatically becomes let's toss play away and just start grinding it out, and we realize we're gonna hit a wall eventually.
Yeah, we act like those two things are diametrically opposed. They're not. They coexist so seamlessly together, right? So I challenge you. You're working too much and you're stressed out. Go play, man, and I guarantee your work's gonna get better too.
Well, I think play also can become destructive when it becomes like going out and getting hammered at the bar, and that might feel like play, but that's not actually play. That's just coping.
Right, that like quality play versus like diversion. And what do you think is the role? Like, there's like several things going on. Like, I'm like so many things in my head right now. But with regards to play, I feel one of the big things that takes us away from that is technology and distractions. And also like the media imposing on what our lives should look like versus what we want them to be like. And the other thing with regards to the internet and technology's accessibility, I was talking to a gentleman over the summer and he went through, his own struggles that he opened up to me about. And he supported, I think it was his brother or his cousin. And one of the things he talked about as the biggest distraction was the accessibility to porn, for example. And he's like, this 18-year-old wasn't getting outside and playing. And so I think this loops into like technology and accessibility to these distractors and ties into that mental health. What do you feel is going on around that, or how can that be used in a positive way or create boundaries around technology or whatever the main distractors might be?
I mean,
well, I think it's a beautiful gift. We live in an amazing time where we can connect, like what we're doing right now. We cannot do this if we didn't have the kind of technology we have and social media and all this stuff. But that's the line right here, is that it's such a beautiful gift that we have. But at the same time, it can be so incredibly harmful to our lives. Because what do we tend to do is, how many people do we know that wake up and they scroll through Instagram kind of aimlessly, right? So I think it's a balance of having that discipline of saying 10 minutes a day on social media, 10 minutes a day on Instagram, whatever that is, and having that discipline. Because while it is an incredible gift and it allows for so much, for example, for us to be able to have this kind of conversation together, it also is, when we abuse it, just like anything really in life, right? It has some really harmful effects. Harmful effects.
There are many, I went through some, I read a book, the start of the summer called Deep Work. It's a concept about, how to improve your focus skills and your concentration skills. And I'm all about always developing more skills and getting better at it. But it's certainly in this day and age, there's one certainty, is that we're distracted all the time. We're distracted by technology. So you can include social media in that. You're distracted by people. You're just distracted by, like society it's a battle, and it just wants your attention. And when we get really good at something, it's because, that whole, like, if you've done it 10,000 times, you become a pro at it. So, when you're able then to just focus and concentrate, you can accomplish so much more, right? And doing the one thing and doing it so that whole book really, like, is about, if there's one thing you can put to practice and to always developing those skills, those concentration, those skills based on focus, is to, do something for a couple hours at a time. And then you do need a mental break. I always thought that, going through school and all the way to university is not so much about learning a certain topic. It's about, can you go in the library for 4 hours at a time? That's the challenge. It's about learning something, but can you sit in that library for 4 hours at a time, 5 days a week, 6 days a week? That's the whole challenge. Can you put your mind to that? And then that's the challenge day in and day out when it comes to work, whatever we do. It's like, can you actually zone in for, say, a couple hours, and then you can take your break, for whatever it is that you do for a living. But it's hard now because we get challenged on these distractions. So, but I do like the idea of, like, where we're at is change the dynamic, try to improve those concentration, those focus skills. And then you can go out and play all you want. When you do that, when you block everything out, you can go a lot deeper in whatever it is that you're putting your mind to, whatever it is. If you're a pro athlete, if you're a doctor, if you are whatever it is. So I think it's pretty amazing. It's just mind games, but you got to play those games to your favor, and knowing that distractions are out there, just know how to handle them.
Something that comes to mind when we think about technology is this is probably the biggest challenge we'll face in the next few years around communication. I think, to your point, guys, is like, how can we leverage these tools and also know when to prioritize what tool to use? Like, what conversations can be had over email? What conversations can be had over text? And when is it time to pick up the phone? Because when we talk about communication issues that we talked about in the beginning, it's basically we've been vulnerable over text, over emails. And to your point, Trav, where you said, like, this guy wrote out an email, he probably would have said it over the phone, but behind an email, man, are we good at being vulnerable? But how can we practice those skills over a phone or over a face-to-face conversation? To what you were saying, Vince, earlier, shoulder to shoulder, how can we make this face-to-face? So I think technology does have its downside for that. And I think, and I'm in that work on a day-to-day basis, and we all are in our work lives. Like, when is it time to pick up the phone and just, like, touch base again? Like, just have a voice-to-voice conversation.
I got into a big argument last night with a group because they were slamming on millennials and, like, world is gonna end because of the millennials.
Give me a break. I hate that excuse, man. It's insane.
I was like, well, and these are people, like, I think this is where my institutional bias comes into play, because I work for a company where I see 20-something-year-olds run a multi-million-dollar business, right? So I see the exact opposite of it. And I think I'm just, like, an optimist in the sense of, like, everything is cyclical in nature. And I think that people at the end of the day want and crave authentic relationships. They want authentic connection. And there's going to be a point where enough is enough for some people. And we're already seeing a little bit of a counterculture to the whole technology thing where, Tinder is just not that good anymore. Like, you got to get out there and you got to actually meet people, and you got to, like, hear their voice. You got to, like, be able to look into their eyes. And so I don't know what the answer is. I just know that I think that, like, the cycle is gonna refresh itself to a point where people are actually really back at that place of connecting.
It's like we've been testing these things out a little bit, and I like what you were saying, Trav, about, like, those boundaries. I mean, I talk a lot about it. This obviously is, like, a global issue, not just men, right? But men and women are impacted on, like, the communication or lack thereof, sometimes using these inappropriate means to communicate something that would be better done in person or over the phone or something. But creating those boundaries as well to have more time for play, more time for focus. And actually, interesting that you mentioned deep work, Vince, because the author, he's actually not on social media, and he talks about that. And just like, I feel that plays a lot with, let's say we talk about Movember and its impact on mental health. You know, it's being shown that the more time you spend on social media, the more depressed you might become. There's a link there.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So it's definitely, it's like alcohol as well, right? It's like everything in the dosage is so important.
Yeah.
Anything in too much is going to have a negative impact.
Everything in moderation.
Yeah. And what do you feel, you know, I guess this I'm going to turn into like the woman here. And I don't want to generalize too much, but let's a little bit. What do you feel women can do to really be a support? Because I feel there's something missing as well there, is like men and women and supporting one another to elevate. And maybe Rob, you saw this at the event you guys did. Like, what if something came up there? Like, how can we grow together versus like keep on, you know, like Andrew said, it's great to have those safe spaces, but is there something we need to do together?
I think what came up, I think what started to happen was the guys started to get really like vulnerable and started to talk about like the challenges very openly. And I think that this is where our number 2 challenge that the guys identified was that there is a societal pressure that is placed upon us by women to be a specific way. And if we're not, then we're deemed not as good as we're not true full men, right? And so when we started to get vulnerable, there were some of the women who started to get, I would say almost like borderline aggressive in terms of like, well, why aren't you doing more? Well, why don't you do this? And it's like, whoa, this is exactly what we're talking about right now. It's like we're just putting it out there. We're just saying we're vulnerable. Like,
and I did it one time, and this is what I did.
Whoa. So I think that there's a part of it that is like granting some grace and compassion, and especially for the guys out there, like these guys here, and the guys I bet that are surrounded, that surround these guys here. That like there are guys who are good dudes. And there are guys who are like, are going to make a difference, who are going to lead from the front. And we're still fighting the societal pressures. So that have been ingrained in us. So it's like compassion and grace is what I would say.
I think that, you know, when it comes to the role that women play with men's health and everything we've talked about, it's like, you know, I call them the gatekeepers. It's like because like women are like the first, like for example, when it comes to time to at least say you want to have a conversation with you have to get a doctor's appointment or any type of like dentist appointment. Only when it comes to like in the family, it's like the woman who's going to make the call, like doctor's appointment, dentist appointment. You know, it's kind of known, it's like they're going to pick up the phone. So I see them as like the cornerstone, the gatekeepers of men's health. It's so important. And like Movember, there wouldn't be a campaign without women, period. So, you know, there is, and of course there's also massive roles when it comes to also just that the concept of emotional intelligence, and active listening. I mean, just human beings, men and women, and balance each other out. So the role is invaluable, and I think that it needs to be heightened, and it's, you know, there needs to be just nothing but respect right from the get-go when it comes to women and their role. And so I'm glad you asked that question, because that's how men are getting healthier. And sometimes through it's difficult, but it's, I think it's women that are helping into getting those men healthier, and it's just a massive role.
There's something about what we talked about earlier for us about being that brick wall, and when I think of like how I feel I need support is just that listening piece. And if I think about Rob's example of you guys being vulnerable, what could it have looked like if they had just listened? Like just listen to that and maybe like push back with a question. Like, cool. Like, and what else is behind that? Kind of like what you were talking about, Trav, is like, and it's like what we should do as well for ourselves between buddies. And I think we actually just need that. I think we just need the taste of our own medicine of just like having a pair of ears, just listening and to like who's there in front of you. And it might take a few layers to peel off. It might take a little bit more time, especially in the beginning. Yeah.
I think that'll, you know, that I want to add to that point is what else? That is my favorite coaching question. I mean, out of all the studying I've done and all the, you know, the books I've read, what else? And what else? Okay. And what else? And that is exactly it. You're peeling the layers away slowly and you're getting down to the meat and bones right there.
I think this theme of that listening piece is huge. And I can totally like see, like I probably could have been one of those women that was like, let's go. Like, I want more, you know, it's like you give them an inch and you want more because it's like meeting people where they're at. And I think when it comes to having these conversations and holding the space, and Pat and I, like there was that experience on Saturday night where I held a really long moment of silence and you could tell like the tension in the room, that discomfort. We really want to fill it in. Whereas instead it could just like, can we hold it? And I think that takes a lot of personal work to be able to hold that space for someone to be vulnerable, to share it without feeling like you have to add. Like, and I think that, you know, maybe as women, it's like, hey, you're enough by just being there for your man or for the men in your life by being a brick wall, you know, just be there, hold the space for them. You don't have to add, like, you know, and even Rob, you referred to like that desire to be solution focused. There might not need to be a solution that you need to bring. You can just like hold it. So that's one thing I feel that's been coming back today, of like that need for space and for listening.
There's this place for communication. Like I think there's this huge theme of like we like to start off with men's health, and we've come to this huge discussion around communication and then the importance of listening in. And therefore creating this space to be vulnerable and be open about men's health and our mental health, physical health.
And even these practices, go ahead, Rob.
Oh no, I was going to say how funny it is that we were talking. It went really quickly from the physical realm to the emotional and
because we want to talk about it.
We want to talk about it. It's awesome.
But so interesting, like how these pieces also seem to light those up. Like you guys have all mentioned like that physical need to open up as well. It like really ties in. And Trav, like you talked, you know, about meditation and that practice, like giving your own space to be able to hold it for someone else. But yeah, it's not just about, I think, you know, even with, you know, Vince, when you were talking about the gentleman you spoke to today who's with prostate cancer, I think there is a big piece of like shame and not, you know, feeling comfortable about talking about it because of like how that's perceived, or that's, you know, even our lack of knowledge about how bodies work. Like it's not a sexy cancer, right? Like it's like talking about these things, but I think that's a big piece of being able to release it. There's a freedom when you feel you have nothing to hide. And for me, that's one of the things I see when it talks about health and feeling free and alive, is feeling like you don't have anything to hide. And, you know, even
that's the ultimate freedom to me, honestly.
It's to show that there is a safe space, you know, and for many people, they're not aware that there is a safe space. You have to just show them and just, you know, that it is there. And some of us live in that space more hours in a day than others. And we should be grateful for that. And, but some men, they never see it. And, you know, that space is a conversation, and it is sometimes it's good to have it in a different environment than you're used to. But that's what all these topics are all about. And I mean, key word here is safe space, and to realize that it is there, and there are people out there that are willing to listen to you and to give advice, and it can come from all angles. It can come from friends, from family, professional advice. But people are there for your physical and mental well-being.
I often will like to just, if I can tell somebody's has like that shield of invulnerability, I will often just say, man, like, this must be exhausting for you. Like, you must be tired. And I think that it is. Like, I have no further place to look than my dad. Like, he would never tell us when he got sick, or would tell us when he would go to the hospital or anything like that. And I think a part of his like illness, you know, or any of his illnesses, were coming from the fact that he was trying to be so strong all the time. And it takes a lot of energy. And so I think that when I've experienced guys like that and given them like the out to just like let go and to not have to expend that energy, it's kind of like a sigh of relief, because it does take a lot of energy to put up that wall.
Yeah. It's like redefining what strength means as well. There's something really strong and powerful about being able to release that.
Yeah. And it's so, I think it's just so important especially for fathers. Like, if they're gonna start to model this vulnerable behavior for their children, it's like they need to see that before they're past their 5th year. You know, like, they need to see that vulnerability. They need to have it modeled, and they need to feel what that feels like. So it's just not even so much important for like us as the guys who are on the planet right now. It's like for the next generation. It's like we got to start to breed that vulnerability.
And what do you guys feel? I mean, I feel like we've covered so much, and I want to be mindful of your time as well. And I'd love to maybe hear from each of you, like, what's one thing from tonight that you feel has really stood out, and where do we go from here? Like, what's one maybe step or one thing that you want to share with men and women out there?
Well, I think for me is that there's an immediate need around mental and physical well-being for men, but for the top purpose of this conversation, I think specifically mental well-being, and to have these. There are your entourage, your family, your friends, and professionals are there for you. Movember has been there for 15 years now, 10 years in Canada, and it's really there as a reminder once a year that, hey, in case you have never thought about it the past year, now's a good time to talk to your doctor. Now's a good time to get healthy. Now's a good time to have a conversation about things that you're holding in. But that's kind of the cornerstone. But you've got the whole year for it. It should be part of your holistic lifestyle of being able to know that there's a safe space and that you're not going to get judged for it. And you shouldn't like accept if anyone decides to judge you for that. That you have the right to choose and be like, no, like it's important that I share this. And the more we have these conversations, the more we're going to start to demystify this, this stigma around about, what men are supposed to be. And when you're, if you're doing a physical activity, some of the tips that we've covered tonight, if you do a physical activity, you'd be surprised at how much right after is the best time for you to open up about just one thing at a time. And that's, you have to be like life-changing right away. But, mental health is just, the data's there, 1 in 5 will be impacted by it every year. 1 in 8 Canadian men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer. Just every day, 8 Canadian men die by suicide. It's just astonishing. It's awful. So, I think that's the safe spaces out there. That's what I take away.
Love it.
If I could add on, definitely there's a takeaway here. Something that I put into practice, and hearing you guys share about it so much just like re-emphasizes the importance of keeping this type of conversation alive. And I think putting in place a structure in your life so that you can keep this conversation alive. And I think we all do in our lives. And hearing you guys speak reiterate the importance of myself keeping this alive and how I can spread this to the people around me, and creating this daily, and it is a daily conversation, a daily practice to keep that alive. And we're going to get better at it. We're going to actually get more in touch about how we're feeling and be able to speak more powerfully of it. And it's going to create that next generation, get them in that conversation earlier than later on that being just okay. And that's actually strength.
Yeah. Thanks, Pat.
I forgot what the question was.
I was just kind of wanting to check in about like what, and you guys have added on so much, but like what you're standing out for you tonight, and like what's the next step? Where do we go from here?
Go ahead, Chad.
Well, I give Rob time to think. The metaphor of campfire conversations over kind of the bar conversations. Lend an ear, listen, quit waiting for your turn to talk. Like really, I swear, man, if you, Melissa, we talk about this all the time. When you wake up every day with the mindset of who can I serve so powerfully that they never forget my conversation for the rest of their life, you are going to have thousands of people at your funeral. You're going to have people celebrating your life. You're going to make so many friends. And most importantly, you're going to touch lives. And you're going to save lives. You're going to touch lives. You're going to change lives. And all you have to do, you don't have to have skills. You don't have to be a coach. You don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be any of that. All you have to do is just learn how to really listen. And when we have evolved as men to really embrace that and to really hold other men at that level and to really support them and to really listen, fuck, man, the world can change, really, really, man. But when we're all on that page, we have to all be on that page, man. And that's it. Just listen and have a heart. Do it with service without expecting anything in return. Dude, I haven't talked to you in a month or two, and I know you've been upset. Coffee's on me this week. Let's go hang out and have some coffee. I want to talk to you about your life. And just don't say anything, man. Just what else? What's going on in your world, man? What's your dream? What are you scared of? What's happening? Where's your anxiety coming from? Just listen. And that's all we have to do. That's, as a society, we've come so far in so many different areas. We've advanced in so many areas, but we've regressed as far as the most important skill, which is just listening, just opening our ears and having a heart. And that's all we have to do. I guarantee every single one of you guys and anybody watching this stream right now, you wake up tomorrow and you write in your journal, you set that intention, who can I serve so powerfully or that they'll never forget this conversation the rest of their life? Game on, man. The world has been impacted greatly because of you.
I love that, Chad. And I think just to build off that, I want people to hold people accountable, and I want people to be unreasonable with that accountability, and I want people I want guys to let the other guys go if they're trying to crawl out of that boiling pot of water, and for them to push them out. Because that one crowd that escapes, man, he can turn that stove off. And and I think it's just really being this stand for the type of masculinity that we want in the world. And it's not going to be easy. And they're going to be people who make fun of you, people who are going to try to bring you down. And it's like, it's just taking a stand.
I'd like to add to that, though, because it's not easy in the beginning. It's not easy. And I've had my own experience. I know we got to go, but of people disparaging and all these things, like, what are you doing? This is insane. You're crazy, or all these things. But I'll have you consider that had I not taken that stand and jumped out of that pot, I would never know you guys. I would never know some of the incredible people that I've gotten to know throughout my life. So while, you gotta be willing to, go through some valleys to get to some beautiful peaks. And I will tell anybody thinking about it and being vulnerable and open, it's worth it, man. It's more than worth it. It's as far as I'm concerned, it's the only way to really live fully.
And be mindful of distractions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think we need to be reminded of that on a day-to-day basis too. But guys, thank you so much. I think this is super powerful for those who are listening, who will be listening, you know, and I think one of the things that I'm really present to is just like, there are resources as well, right? Extraordinary men like you, the people you surround yourself with, organizations like Movember, and of course, donating to Movember, being part of it, taking part, I think is a really great place to like open yourself up to it and educate yourself and make a difference. And if you can grow a mustache, go for it.
We're doing it in Miami, Vince. So, you know,
Yeah, you
it's not going to be pretty.
are.
Again, Movember accepts all of them, and so we don't close. Just you know, even if it doesn't look good, it means maybe you'll have more conversations about men's health.
100%.
I think yeah, of course. The shadier it looks, the better it is. Well, the mustache. But I think you guys brought in so many great points, and I think not only from like the role of women and men together here, but just like the impact that this has globally all over the world. So thank you so much. And of course, like, you know, we got two guys here representing Lululemon. I think I often tell people when you need like a boost, like go to a Lululemon store. Like there's amazing men there that can lift you up, like that are building great communities. And we talked about that, you know, this essence of play, but surrounding yourself by great people really makes a big difference. So, and I'm definitely taking away that space, creating that space and listening. That's what I tell people all the time, and just to keep on practicing that. Love you guys so much.
Love you too.
Thank you so much. Okay. Talk to you guys later.
You guys be good.
Take care.
Guys.
Bye.